Very exciting and fun-filled panel discussion on the topic crafting joy and happiness in built environment, how we can inspire, innovate, and integrate. This session will be moderated by Venkat Neelakantan, who is the Executive Vice President and Group Head for Corporate Real Estate Services at Capgemini. In his role, he manages a range of responsibilities that span real estate realization and strategy across the globe for Capgemini. On the panel, we have Shanti Sundar. She currently leads people management for Google Cloud for APAC and Japan. Prior to Google, she spent over 2 decades in this domain for various tech organizations. Our next panelist is Ritesh Sachdev. He is a dynamic and high-performing real estate professional with more than 2 decades of corporate real estate experience with both service providers and development companies. As a Senior Vice President on Head, Ritesh is responsible for the P&L of commercial realty business for Tata Realty. Our next panelist is Dr. Deepta Satish. She's a design researcher, educator, architect, and planner working in sensitive, contentious landscapes. She is the head for Srishti Manipal Institute of Art, Design and Technology, Mahe Bangalore campus, and Manipal Center for Design with Environment through Education, Planning and Advocacy. Our final panelist is architect Gayatri Shetty, who is the co-founder for Gayatri and Namit Architects, GNA in short. GNA has been recipient to close to 39 national international awards. They offer consulting in the fields of architectural conservation through GN Heritage Matters, and she is also involved in an upcoming publication about the traditional knowledge systems to protect the rich cultural heritage. Please put your hands together and welcome our wonderful guests.
We take this mic or something?
There's a mic for you.
That's one.
Venkat, yeah.
Good evening, everybody. Are we audible? Yes. Excellent. I have a small cheat sheet for everybody. So it's important I share it so we are all in sync and we have a conversation which is consistent. And we don't go tangential. And lovely to see some of the people I know in the audience. So nice to meet you, Viba. Oh, yeah. There you go, Ritesh. Did I miss you in this? There you go. Yeah, I hope it's the same document. Anyway. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you, WiREnet, for this wonderful opportunity. And it's a very interesting topic, crafting joy and happiness in the workspace. And it was a brilliant initial conversation, ma'am, to set the context of art. As my wife was saying, and she had put a post a couple of days on Instagram saying that nature's imperfection is absolutely so perfect, right? And that's where you started. So we were sort of having a conversation, that statement, and today's topic that we initiated this session. So, with that said, I think we all have a common issue today. In my capacity as heading the global real estate across for Capgemini, touch upon people from different cultures, language. You agree, Ritu? I'm sure Boeing has similar issues, right? We have people coming from diverse backgrounds, expectation, interests, thoughts on environment, protection, fairness. You touch upon a gamut of topics. And all of this is expected in a workplace when they come to work. Some like Starbucks, some like coffee day, some like filter coffee from home, some don't like anything at all. Some love the aroma of coffee when they enter the office. Some love to be greeted saying, here is your ID card, get in. How do we handle such expectations? I'm sure Viva from WeWork has similar issues because you got multiple tenants, right, Viva? You don't know how to cater to that. We have these wonderful people here, so I'm in a good space. Typically, I get questioned by the board for various things. Today, I have the opportunity to question the eminent panelists and understand from them what do we do and how do we address some of the expectation. So, questions have already been leaked, but we will try and make it more conversational as we get in. Before we go, mics are working?
Hello, am I audible? Is this? Yeah, mic's working.
So you're happy with the mic? Oh, that's stage one. Excellent. Let's move to stage two then. So we will start, I think we are the minorities on stage. So I'll start with you, Ritesh. From a developer's perspective, right, how do you leverage sustainable practices and try and create environment that sort of brings in the topic of our conversation, which is joy and happiness? Very tough question, isn't it?
Well, thank you, and a very good evening to everyone, and thank you to WiREnet. The first session, joy is a very broad-based, anything that can bring happiness to you, and perhaps to a certain extent, I'll take the liberty of saying as a developer, and by the way, for about 20 years of my corporate life, I used to be on the service provider side of things and putting development companies on the spot. And now that I work for a developer for the past 5 years, I can just so much more appreciate that. But the first session, there can be so many different definitions of joy. It can be peace, it can be calm, it can be a word wow. I'm conscious of what I say, and I'll leave a few data pointers there, Venkat, and then try and build upon those a little bit as we go along. I think the first bit, and again, this is not I won't use the word sales pitch, but I've realized the firm that I work for, Tata Realty, the firm that we represent, I think everyone who works for the Tata Group, and I'll say this for myself, has a innate, inbuilt sense of responsibility. And again, I'm conscious of what I say. I speak for myself. This applies only to me. I think the group overall, if you were to juggle between, I'd say, socialism and capitalism over the last 150 years when the group was founded, I think there was a humane aspect of capitalism which was embraced by the group. Within Realty, what we're trying to do now is, interestingly, we're calling it responsible real estate. Again, COVID, once in a century event, and every time that we have these conversations, we say, well, COVID's 4 years back, and we keep on referring to that now because the return back to the offices and the lines that have blurred between, I'd say, homes and what COVID did for real estate, of the horrible things that COVID did to humanity, but there were some very, very good things that COVID did. It brought demand for real estate back in a generation which, frankly, was not willing to buy and was spending time and money on experiences. Everyone wanted to buy a home. Everyone wanted a larger home. When you're looking at returning back to the offices, I think the flight to quality, the appreciation of flight to quality, the appreciation finally of end-use occupiers and development companies and whoever it were, to be able to appreciate the impact that their choices make, or the fact that we're now finally wanting to pay a premium. I won't use the word premium. I'll tell you another something that we were doing yesterday where, but the appreciation of world-class sustainable developments finally came to the fore. I mean, if I'll use that word. Employers wanted to bring the social connect, the joy, and everything that you'd experience in your home, in your own space, how can you bring that back, and how can you, we were speaking earlier today in the panel, how can you bring those elements back within offices, which I thought became an extension of your personal space, your home. There is a lot of data to be able to prove what perhaps we couldn't do over the last 100 years, perhaps a COVID did. There is data out there to be able to prove that sustainability can also finally end up being financially prudent, apart from a lot of other things. So we were speaking earlier today about form and function and a whole host of those, and a lot of these data pointers, of course, I think now from a development perspective, occupiers, end users appreciate that having full glass facade buildings in India, you finally got a choice and you wouldn't want to choose those. Having developments which have solar passive architecture and developments which don't have full glass facades, in its way will be able to contribute to a more sustainable, holistic environment. We, for example, and this is about 12 odd years back, chose to build for the future, Venkat, and I'll tell you a little bit about why I say that. Ramanujan in Teleon Park, and I'll take a step back. We spoke about passion, we spoke about joy. I think it needs to be starting from ideation. You've got to be passionate about what you build. I think I am fortunate to be working for a firm which puts a lot of importance on taking pioneering positions in sectors of national importance, and in taking pioneering positions in everything that we do. We build for the future. I'm delighted to share that a development that was conceptualized, built 12 years back today is the only IFC World Bank net carbon zero development in the country, and perhaps the 9th globally. The proof of the pudding, as I always say, is what happens out there. This particular development has been a magnet for occupiers, irrespective who, we've had examples, Venkat, where relocation or growth, when there is polling that happens within people internally who work there, they chose to be within Ramanujan and Teleon Park. That's the bond that I'd say sustainable places that offer that joy are able to bring to the larger community overall.
So let me hold you there. Just hold on. As a developer, you say you have the place where employees can come, relate to it, because that was there should be some warmth in the place. Right? That's the word you used, right? People are able to relate to it. So I will transfer this directly to you, right? From, as they put in that image, MS Mosa, to the leading search engine of the world, right? So we will ask the search engine of the world, how does such place help you and what do you do? Apart from the brilliant cafeteria that you run across the globe. Anybody disagrees Google having a brilliant cafeteria? Everybody agrees, right? Their food is always better than anywhere else you go. So, keeping that aside, what do you think? How do you build on what...
I thought you were going to allow me to speak about the brilliant food that we have. But everything Dr. Tristan said and Chandra Jain said and Ritesh said resonates so much. If I look at us, I'm in HR, as you know, in Google. I've traveled to multiple cities, multiple Google offices. And one of the themes that we have, and so therefore I can call myself as a user. Or I can say myself, the employees that I support as users of the space. And one of the things that I like about the space that we have is every Google office that we walk, we can connect to it. So let me give you an example of the office that we currently are. I'm based in Bangalore. And each of the floors that we have different connections to the city that we are. And I remember, and it was a new place we walked into, and we were so thrilled to see what are the new elements that come in, because our real estate team is fantastic. Every time we walk in, they give us some surprise. There will be some hidden space that you'll see joy in people's face. And I walked into, I'm a big Malgudi Day fan, and I walk into the 3rd floor of the building. There are some 8 floors. And there I see the characters come alive. For me, as a user, that was joy. And I took my team there and said, not everybody relates to it, not everybody has seen that. And then when they see that and they say, what is it that, as a person brings the child in you when you're walking into a space, because you're spending most of your waking hours in office. And it is so important for us to keep that in mind. The second thing that I would say is, I remember walking into a Mountain View office. I was talking to Dr. Kristen, whether she's been there. There's a beautiful campus called the Bayview campus in Mountain View. And if you've read about it or you would have Googled about it, many of you must be knowing it. The fully sustainable office space. Apart from that, as a user, when I went, it has got like probably a 1 lakh square foot, just the lobby. And the design element over there is so diverse. You have something from Mexico, you have something from South Africa, you have something from India. And the whole idea is that we believe that we are a company that's for everybody. So when we walked in and we have parents coming in, and we have parents and children, and they can bring family anytime. There is, visits that we arrange, our real estate team arranges. And you can see the joy when they walk in, they can connect to their city. And that, to me, is fantastic. So when, as an HR professional or a manager that I'm dealing with my employees, I can actually pull them out of a difficult situation, go sit in this exciting place, have a lovely coffee, a cappuccino, a latte, a beautiful muffin, a fantastic snack. And because you said I shouldn't talk about snacks, I will still talk about it. Did you know we have 7,500 unique snacks in Google? In our 1,600 cafes that we have around 75 countries. Now that's the diversity that we are talking about. So spaces and food is an extension of that, is actually what connects you to the place. And I resonate so much when you talk about warmth, when you remember, when you walk into our home, you remember something. That's what brings joy. So workplaces, as HR professional, as a user, I believe plays such a significant part.
Absolutely.
In people's lives.
So diversity in space, diversity in snacks, diversity in everything. Now, I will have a follow-up question to that, which is not there in this, is, when we will come to you, is when you give, we are in the service business, one way or the other, product business, right? We are in the people environment. How does such space help us in supporting the employee to be more productive? And I'm using it in the right way, not the saying that, okay, you are supposed to do 100 panels, you did 120. That's not my intent, right? When you work better, when you work happier, your output is better. That's a natural environment. But we just hold on to that, Shanti. Going to you, from a developer to a user, expectation of space, design, keeping snacks aside. As an architect, Gayatri, unless you have a point of view on how the muffin should look in an office, let us know. What do you think of?
It's got to match the interior.
Absolutely. So why don't you take on from here, Gayatri? Why don't you take it on from here to say, okay, what does it mean? What do you study? I mean, we are all very brilliant people in giving requirements, right? We sit across it. We want 7,500 types of snacks in our offices, all fitted out in that wall. Just on a lighter side. But what do you see as an essence? And how do you think you translate that into a tangible asset that we can see, feel, and enjoy as well?
Hi, everybody. I think it's, Deepta will agree, it's great fun to be architects and being in the creative field as such, because when we meet people, when we meet clients, when we meet somebody who wants, a space designed for them, especially in, homes and where people are a lot more sentimental and a lot more passionate about these spaces, we just ask them to dream. So we say, dream, give us your list. We may not tick off every box, but we would like you to do that. And we've seen the craziest of dreams, but it's a great starting point because people want, people love to dream. People want something that, they know that there are things which are not possible. But nevertheless, I think there are areas where, as architects, we tend to look at things being a lot more flexible. You try to kind of fit things in. And post-COVID, of course, there's been so much that one has had to do to kind of make things different for different people. Whether it's the study or whether it's the kitchen, whether it's the dining cum kitchen space, all of it, whether it is in apartments or in, homes or the extended garden. I mean, I can go on forever. I think what was key in a lot of, especially, like our firm is now 33 years plus. And when we initially started, we looked for a space, saying that we wanted to be in a space which was, our own, mainly so that we had the environment that would make everyone happy. So we looked for a site which was actually just next to the army space. So we had a lot of open space next to it. And we moved, 30 people from sitting within, a space in the city, in busy Koramangala. I'm sure everyone knows what that's like. And moved to this little quiet corner, and suddenly everyone was like, this is beautiful, this is wonderful. The feeling that one got was great. And I think that is key to get in a person who's coming into a space. And that is what we love to kind of do, try to see something, look for something that's different, something you want somebody to have that wow factor in a particular place, but not necessarily wow just for the sake of being a wow factor. You want people to kind of really relate, look at being, of course, in nature. I mean, that's something that we've always believed in. Being in Bangalore, veranda living has been been an extension of our architecture. So, I think there are things that can, be listed on and on, but there are a few concepts that really, which are, bringing in the elements into architecture. Like Chandra and, they were just discussing, saying that with this brings that comfort level and that joy into spaces. Though, of course, people have complained, with all these large windows, do you know how much we have to spend for curtains?
And electricity, right? The light comes in. Do you get disappointed when we come back with such, we don't understand your ability to think forward and say, you're such a narrow, shallow person giving me an idea. Do you ever feel that?
All the
yes,
time.
It's fine. All the time. Excellent.
But of course, we really, really, work our way through and convince people to do something.
Fancy has been very transparent with me. You're so shallow. You don't see what others need. It's just how much of the capex that you can spend, how much you can,
No, we don't look at the figures. The figures are all for, the client to look at.
Excellent.
Let's just dream together.
Absolutely. So let me move to the educator part of it. And before we move further on your question, you just lost your first drink for today, the free drink. Yeah. You left the band down. Well, you earned it. Thank you. That's it's interesting. If you see the areas that we have touched upon, none of this is feasible unless we have a base to bring the right talent to the fore, right? Who can dream, who can then translate that into a more tangible structure, sustainable structure, affordable structure, and that's something that the users will enjoy. What are your views on that, Deepta?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
I can. Can you hear her?
It's working.
Yes, okay.
Thanks. Thank you. Thank you for having me here and this wonderful panel, and very exciting to be in a space that was part of my past, actually. I mean, I've, been in the corporate and design space for a number of years, but I've been in education for the last almost 2 decades now. So I think the choice was, I want to sort of just make a couple of statements first, in the sense that when we look at teaching design, I think there are different ways of doing it, and we've sort of inherited a very old system of education, which is just about reading and regurgitating and doing the right, making sure that something is right rather than wrong, and we tend to not experiment too much. And this is why I love what Gayatri said about dreaming. And so what I try to do in terms of looking at facilitating learning, not teaching, facilitating learning is really about getting young people to get imaginative. And that's a big challenge because I sort of work beyond the imagination that we currently live in, which I will share just quickly what I mean by that. And as an architect and planner, I was always interested in outside the building. Because I always, from when I was a teenager, just thinking about the environment all the time. And I actually wanted to do environmental science, not architecture. But then, we were getting our house built in Sadashiv Nagar, and Renu Mistry was, amazing. And so my mom said, why don't you try this? This is great. And so I brought in environment through that. And one of the issues I find in education is that and I was just telling somebody else earlier this evening about things like design briefs, right? Design briefs they're very static. Design this building, this is the square footage, These are all, that's not a brief, that's a spec. A brief to me, when you want to push the imagination, is not to say design a house, but how do you create a home, right? And home is where all the warm, fuzzy stuff happens, but it's also something that's not permanent because we can extend our home into the landscape. Part of our work is part of our home. So where does home begin and end? So to start to think about what are all these connections, right? And for me, the dwelling actually was very interesting. So a lot of how I try to inspire students is to actually push my own boundaries of doing research. And so my research has been really about looking at a very simple a material artifact that I think we're all familiar with, which is the Mangalore tile. We think it's sustainable. It's not. All right? It's actually a German design, and it's an extractive process that we extract clay that's thousands of years old and we produce tiles. And what I want to talk about, not necessarily the tile, but I want to sort of bring to your notice what the tile replaced, which is thatch. Thatch is great for the imagination because it's designed to hold water, it's designed to hold animals, there are creatures that live in it, and it never leaks, right? Whereas the tile is designed to take water away from the house. And it's the same thinking that we use today in designing all the buildings that we are living in and inhabiting. And then we wonder, as we push water away, we have a water crisis. Where has all the water gone, right? So we sort of like built our own strange dystopic world that we're living in. And so how do we then pique students' imaginations, right? Push the boundaries, ask critical questions. And I think that's really important to sort of say, so when we say a design brief, and I'll give you a slightly different example that I gave a young architect this evening, is we don't say design a chair. Can you design a place for me to sit? I can sit on the floor. I can sit on a bed. I can sit on a parapet. But the questions then we'll ask for clarification is really about, now, when do you sit? How do you sit? Those are important questions, the when and how, in order to design. And I think we forget these things when we're actually doing the design work. So to sort of inspire students to sort of think beyond the current capitalistic agenda.
Oh, that was, I was feeling it was my appraisal or she was hitting below the belt, but the reality is, Ritesh, you to an extent I'm sure your real estate guys will appreciate it. When we give a brief, we need 1,000 seats. We need some collaboration areas. We need some creative areas, and that's it. And my cost is X. And we are always concerned. We can't say we need a place to sit because you give that brief, then the world is your oyster, and you end up. But Absolutely true, Deepta. For us to create an environment, and there are creative ways, and you cannot teach somebody to be creative. You can only give them the experience to try, ability to try, and become better at it. Absolutely aligned. So let me reverse the trend. We understand that this office space can be designed in multiple ways. We give the briefs. We have to be thinking sustainable. From a people perspective, you're in you're managing the human resource segment. From a people perspective, do they really appreciate what we're trying to talk or convey or help them to experience?
I think, to be honest, it's a pleasure actually being here. I was thinking, what am I doing in a women in real estate? But coming here, I appreciate the work that all of you do. Now, I have a deep appreciation for the space that are created. I don't think people understand when she said we're designing a place to sit. I don't think people recognize and appreciate that enough. But what they do appreciate is the experience that they walk out with. So I can give you an example of when we created a space in our Bangalore office that was meant for collaboration, like you said, because most of the work that the engineering teams is collaboration. Sometimes it's serendipity. Some ideas come as they're working and they say, why not we work on this? It is not a desk job. Their job is not desk job because somebody is not telling them what to do and then they're just going and coding that, whatever. It is a lot of creative work that they do. So as we were creating the spaces and our real estate team came in and we're talking about what is it that we need to think about and how do we design the spaces. Most of our spaces, if you know, is co-created. So we have teams, Googlers who sit down and say what is it that they need in each of the spaces, and every element is incorporated in the space, so they feel that that's what matters to them. And I remember we had about a lot of fresh grads coming in from the IITs and the other engineering schools who come and join us. And they were looking for a campus experience. They just came into work, and it's new to them. They were looking at all the desks in the collapse spaces, and they said, what does this mean for me? What does this really mean for me? And when we are creating, as people ops, as we call HR, as we are creating immersive onboarding for them, and we could take them from one flow to another to these small pockets of places and tell them how they could use all of these because this is new to them. They're coming from colleges. It is then that they knew what it means to come into a workplace. It's a fascinating experience to see the joy in some of these folks. I'm sure they will enjoy it as they move forward. But each of us, when we walk into a space, we don't appreciate the amount of work and thought that goes into it. But I'm sure people will
Totally agree. And the demand is the space has to support everybody's expectation, requirement, or maybe even there is a handicap that needs to be supported for them to be more, able to work better. People with different abilities to come forward and use the same environment in the way that anybody else will use it. If I may, back to you. You rightly pointed out it takes a long time for a house to become home, right? It takes, the bricks get a lot of life, character, you do a lot of things, and it becomes a home over a period of time. In my personal experience, my corporate life, the office became a home sooner than the house became a home, right? And but when you have budding architects, how do you, is there a way they think differently between a corporate workspace and a general creative workspace? You need to look at it differently. The problem is different, right? It's a combination of people that come into a place, whereas if it's a home or if it is something else, you think differently.
So I think there needs to be new approaches, because in my mind, when we're talking about happiness and joy and well-being, human well-being depends solely on the well-being of the environment, because everything we do and everything we use comes from there in some form or the other. And so the first thing I think is to start to understand So I don't think the space necessarily, the space specs and all those design things will come. But where do you begin the design process, right? Is it when you get the brief, and do you sort of, or the specs, and do you just look at that and start working? Or is it a real engagement in the site? And when I mean real engagement, I mean, as architects and planners, site is part of what we do. And for me, it's not site, it's like landscapes. I work in these massive landscapes. But when I'm saying site, or citing a place, or citing a particular use, how do you do it, right? You have to think beyond that place. You have to think about, are you getting water? You have to look at all the resources that you need. Are you getting, what is this landscape actually? Is it an arid landscape that Bangalore is naturally? So what kind of trees do we plant here then on the site? Do we bring in jacarandas, or do we want to bring in neem trees, which are actually good for the soil, right? So how do we take care of the design from a creative process of walking in the landscape, right? We all walk the site, but what do we see when we walk the site? Are we just looking at, okay, here is this rock, we can do something with it. Here is this tree that we want to save. Here is this bush that we want to get rid of. Is it just a list? Is it just an inventory? Or do we actually understand the larger systems that play out when the buildings or the spaces actually get designed, and what does that impact, what kind of impact does that have on its environment? And I think that's really important. So that's the kind of way in which I work with students, in the sense of getting them to start to consider, okay, you thought about this, but what about that? Playing devil's advocate, playing good, fun games to get them to be critical, but also to start to consider what it means to physically, bodily engage, and then think from that perspective of what design can mean and what space is. And is it space, or is it placemaking?
Interesting, placemaking. Thank you. Go to you on that. I mean, if you would summarize this, any special project I can think of that you can share your experience, which sort of heightened the experience of joy, happiness, I enjoyed going to work, I mean, you got the feedback, 30 awards over 32 years.
Well, I think, basic concepts that we hold very dear to, our hearts, Namit and me, when we started, was that whatever it is, come what may, we must look at, light, ventilation, and natural, a natural kind of atmosphere, with as much green as possible, whatever that space is. And we've kind of held on to it tightly. So whatever space you do, you bring in as much as you can of all of this.
And do you have the pressure of reuse when you design?
Yep.
A lot of it?
Of course, yeah. So, but the thing is, it's all, different projects prioritize differently. We did a training center for Bosch, which was really, when you were talking, it just came to me that, we were talking to the user group and, talking about what they wanted and got all the specs. But then finally, it was like, how do you bring energy to, say, 25 conference rooms? So, and how do people relate? You have people coming from across the country and maybe even beyond the country. How do they relate to each of this? And of course, Bosch being Bosch wanted everything as numbers, This could be this, and this could be the numbering of each of these rooms. And we said, no, let people learn to relate, even in terms of wayfinding. Let's see how they can kind of, find their spaces in a more interesting space. So we came up with this idea of actually working with names of states for each of these, conference areas and meeting rooms. And then, did certain amount of artwork based on, what the state was known for, and, a little more interesting thoughts about that particular state, whether it was their art or whether it was, personality, maybe, the life bridges of Meghalaya, these things. But what was fun was that, the concept that we came up with is that, people enjoy education even when they are working and they're open to it. So we said, okay, let's give that little extra. Let's get people to kind of understand things a little more or want to learn some of these things. So we did bring in certain areas of, you know, Indian philosophy. We said, okay, it's talking about the chakras, talking about how the chakras relate to colors in different, you know, floors of the building. And it, you know, I mean, you question it all, and then as much as you want to look into, you do. You know, so these were things that we said would be an underlying concept, and you know, people kind of really relate and kind of get enthused to kind of be in that space and learn more about themselves.
And I think today's generation, or probably even the workforce, are far more informed and knowledgeable about sustainable practices, right? And I think that poses more of a challenge when we attract talent or when we attract people to come and work with us. But before I go to Ritesh, could we have some mics for the audience to ask questions so that we save some time? Ritesh, to you. With this kind of expectation from businesses today, I think sustainability is the order of the day. It is not, can I have one? Right? Unless you have a practice, unless you have a product which is sustainable, building on various things that we spoke about, Ritesh, firms would not come to you, right? As a person developing a large unit for business to establish. Where are you with that? You know, the buildings of the future, sustainable, attractive, supporting the various expectations. Where are you with any of the one? You mentioned Ramanujam, but if you could just build on that to say, okay, how do you plan to move forward in that particular space?
Thank you. I guess as I was saying earlier, we're a bit of an elephant in the room, and I say this on behalf of the developer community because you're not building for self-use, you're not building for one client. And I say this with respect, but again, thank you for being our partners, and I look forward to perhaps the cafeteria, which will have even more variety in our developments now in Gurugram. But you know, we're looking forward to that. And Venkat, we thought rather, not I, that having LEED certified developments, taking a step forward and saying we'll do net zero developments, taking another step forward saying health and well-being, platinum health and well-being certified developments were enough. And when we had world-class partners like Google coming in saying, well, now let's do a whole life carbon assessment study for your developments to see what have you used and the impact that this will have, because our name will be associated with it. So thank you for pushing those boundaries again. The point that I was making is we're not building for self-use, and something that you build needs to be right, Venkat. We were speaking about joy, we were speaking about passion. And again, I'll talk a little bit about Ramanujan, and I say why that is so dear to our heart and why we often refer to that as our trophy asset. I'd say the joy there is a culmination of how can you work with the community per se. And again, we were talking about joy and what is the definition of joy. For some, and again, on the OMR phase 1, when we were amongst the first developments where we know how the traffic movement in our country can be, and we know how difficult it can be to cross a busy road. We said joy perhaps will be that we will have a foot overbridge constructed from the MRTS line and have employees or people, more importantly, get down from the train and with a smile on their face cross the road and come straight to the asset. That what we thought was joy. What we again thought joy was, again, different definition of joy, on that road, be able to work with the traffic marshals and all the way through and through for about 5 kilometers, also use artificial intelligence and tell everyone who's coming in saying, you will have a clutter-free, easier, happier access to the park so that you're able to be happier and more productive. That's what we thought was joy. we again thought joy will be if you're able to manufacture land, literally, and have a podium-style development done so that when people in a place like Chennai have solar passive architecture at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 12 o'clock in the afternoon, in a place like Chennai, walk on the podium to be able to enjoy that sea breeze at any point of time, mingle with their partners and have a smile on their face in the afternoon walk. That's what we thought was joy. Was there a substantial amount of capital that we spent building it 12 years back? Oh, absolutely. Are we delighted about what we had built so that we're able to enable stickiness, not with clients, but for people overall, for them to be able to come in and enjoy the time that we spend there? That's what we thought was joy. And we're delighted to be able to extend that into other developments. And again, as I said, this is not what we're building. People within real estate and construction and overall the amount of carbon that we emit, I think each one of us in any form and manner can make a significant improvement. And I'd perhaps just end with, by the way, just the one final piece. Joy for our architect friends can be if you were to create a 45,000 square feet flow plate, and instead of having perhaps 20 plus columns, have 4 columns so that you're able to unleash your creativity and have a lot of circulation areas, etc. That's what we thought was joy. Again, I'll end with this one quote where Mary Ann said that we frankly don't need 100 people doing ESG perfectly. We'd need 100,000 people doing ESG imperfectly. Everyone can do their bit, and that's what we're hoping we'd be able to do with our developments.
Thanks, Ritesh. There's a lot of pressure behind the scene. Too much of pressure. I can feel the heat. The lady is almost going to turn off the mic. Questions which will have only a yes or no answer from the audience. Anyone? I suspect. This typical, usual suspect. Yes. You need a mic?
Thank you, Venkat. Great meeting you once again. And good evening, to everybody. Ritu from Boeing. Well, I wear multiple hats, and some of the things that you all spoke about is what we grapple with, and I shared a lot of, emotions as Venkat was speaking about the challenges we face managing corporate real estate, creating those wonderful magical spaces, allowing people to dream, and then strike a balance between, your spend versus the dream that you want to build. But I wanted to just hear from you. I think one of the aspects of what we are missing today in the built environment is the neurodivergent workforce, right? And I would love to hear, how you all are trying to, from your academic journey and to the spaces you create, and you from an HR perspective, how are you all looking at joy and happiness for that neurodivergent workforce, which is very, very integral part of, the spaces where people come and thrive and they really want to do the next level of work for the companies that they get hired with. That's my question. Anybody can take it.
Okay, I'll give it a shot. I'm not going to say yes or no. I think, in a nutshell, I think we tend to over-design everything. Everything has to be specific, so specific. We've forgotten that this is actually a very flexible garment. It can do many things, just like the dhoti. You can live out of it, right? So how can we design or think about teaching or facilitating learning about design and designing spaces that are flexible, truly flexible, not just about giving enough space for something to happen, right? Can it morph, right? And can it become something for anyone? And I think that is really important. When we don't over-design, we allow for other things to happen that we cannot predict. And for me, that is where because I think I'm neurodivergent. Like, I've got multiple things going on in my head about everybody's. And so I think, there's a way in which to design spaces that can encourage thinking beyond, and for people who can already think in multiple frames simultaneously. So not to over-design.
I guess that's all we have time for. See, the volume in the mic also went up to say, okay, you got to say it's all over. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your patience, and I hope you had a good time. Thank you.
Thank you, Venkat. So we're going to have the questions for dinner time. So please hold on to your questions and we can probably ask them at that point of time. We'd like to thank, I'm just inviting Sunita and Fancy to come. Thank you so much for sharing some heartfelt insights. A huge round of applause for everybody, please.